So let's start. And I've been asked to use a microphone because they're recording this. Are you videotaping it too? Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for coming. Appreciate you coming out kind of early in the evening. My name's Gary Sanfason. I am the recovery manager, the flood recovery manager for Boulder County, and I'm going to be moderating the panel tonight. I think we'll keep it very simple in a sense that we'll just wait till the end of the presentations for ask questions. And since there's such a small group, we were going to have you write your questions on cards. I think tonight you just put your hand up and get all your answers responded to. I want to thank LifeBridge for providing the space and helping out with the sound. And they've been huge for the Town of Lyons, for the whole community, really stepping up. I want to thank the presenters who we'll be introducing here real quick, and Dave and Lee and all the folks in the Sustainability Office for Boulder County for putting this together in such short order. We may have to do this again because obviously everyone couldn't get here. They probably needs to know this information. So the presenters are going to have about 10 minutes, give or take a little bit more than that, to present their topics. Again, if you could hold your questions till we're done with everything, and then we'll get to you. One of the presenters was not able to be here, but we do about mold, but we do have someone from another outfit that can help answer some of those questions. He won't be presenting. That's David Cohn here. Appreciate that. Let's see. Do we have someone from our center here? Okay. Here's the key thing about tonight. We have to be out of here at 6:45 for the next group, which is the Town of Lyons is having their community meeting. Anybody from Lyons here? All right, great. So they're going to be here, so we need to be out of the actual space. We can be in the lobby. So after we're done with this, the presenters will still be here. You're welcome to, meet with them outside in the lobby if you want to. So I just wanted to let you know that. So in terms of updates, where are folks from? Where are you from in the county? Unincorporated Boulder County? Outside of Lyons? Town of Boulder? City of Boulder, okay. You're a speaker, okay. Where? Longmont? Longmont, okay. Apple Valley, okay. I was just out there talking to Todd and Monica. So we're going to have a community meeting out there probably next week. So let me give you a couple quick updates just about the Boulder County recovery in general. So the website to get information for Boulder County is bouldercountyflood.org. Okay, that's where all of our information is being housed right now, bouldercountyflood.org. We have just opened up a rebuilding and permit information center in downtown Boulder at our land use office, which is 2045 13th Street, and I'll be here to give you this information too. That's operating from 10 to 4:30, and that's a great place to go to get answers from staff from transportation, land use, and public health, all at one place. They can call up your property, put it on the screen, and understand what your challenges are. What else? We also are having, I don't know if any of you have flood insurance. Did any of you have flood insurance before this? Okay, well, we're having a workshop. We're having a workshop next week on the 24th, which I'll get your contact information. We don't have a location yet for it, but we have some consumer advocate group coming out to help with people in that settlement process, because that can be a little challenging. So that's kind of just general overview in terms of some of the updates for Boulder County recovery. I'll be here as well, so we can talk afterwards if you have any other questions, because I want to make sure we get into the presentations now. So I'll introduce the speakers, and some of them have slideshows, some don't. So I'm going to ask the speakers if you need to get up there and do your thing or be down here, however you want to work it. Appreciate that. And at the very end, we'll have questions, and I'll give you a mic because we want to record that for posterity here, probably put it somewhere. So, anything else, Dave, that I'm missing? No? Okay. So, for the first speaker, we have Ed Hedgewood. He's an HVAC and energy efficiency coordinator at Red Rocks Community College, and the topic he's going to be speaking on is deciding to repair or replace flood damaged combustion appliances and tips for choosing a contractor. Come on down.
I'm going to move pretty fast through this. This information will be available to you. There'll be a sign-in sheet at our table, and we can send you this information. So if we don't get all of it, we'll get it to you via email. Thing about combustion equipment is that once it's been exposed to the flood, it's no longer covered by warranty. So if you had new equipment, it's not going to be repairable under warranty. So I want to get that point out. Also, I talked to Xcel Energy. They've replaced 2,000 gas meters so far from flood damage. So I've been through a few floods. I grew up in Mississippi, and you may not catch that accent, but it's here. And if you don't understand everything I say, we'll get some translators and we'll get it across. But I've been through 68, I went through Camille, hurricane, and I went through the flood of the Pearl River next to my home there in Jackson, Mississippi. Flood stage starts at 19 feet. The river went to 39 feet. So I've been through this, and so I know some of what you're up against. But on combustion equipment like furnaces, warranty's out, and if we've replaced 2,000 gas meters, there's normally a correlation that there should be about 2,000 furnaces going to be replaced, because if the flood damaged the gas meter, there's a high probability that the furnace got damaged in that process. Do any of you know if you got your gas meter replaced? You did? Okay. All right, next slide, please. Rule of thumb, depending on your thumb, is if your equipment repair bill is going to be 50% more than new equipment, it's a good opportunity to move toward replacement of equipment. Another thing is to look at the age of the equipment. When you've been dealt these lemons, there's an opportunity to turn the lemons into lemonade in this process. Also understand that if you're without heat, you need to move pretty fast, and we'll address that on the next slide. Some other things to consider besides just the cost of repair is the convenience of a new piece of equipment. You get all the latest technology in one manufactured package, and it goes in pretty nice. The equipment's more efficient, so you get better utility bills. And then if you have lost your air conditioning system, the refrigerant that most of you have is refrigerant R22 trichlordifluoromethane, and it's not very earth friendly. So the new refrigerants and the new equipment are more earth friendly, so it's a chance to upgrade to a more environmentally friendly unit with higher efficiencies. There's also rebates available for some of this higher efficiency equipment too. Next one. The other thing around my home, no matter what I do, I mean, I'm kind of an HVAC guy, but if I don't improve the comfort in our home whenever I do HVAC work to improve the furnace and upgrade and things like this, new thermostat, I'm not considered successful in my own home. I have to make it more comfortable. So in this process, if you haven't been comfortable, this is a time to look at that. And then air quality, I don't think the two are separate. Comfort and indoor air quality go. And after a house has been flooded, it may be an opportunity to look at what they call a ventilation system that takes air from outside and relieves the inside air, and as the two pass by each other, it recovers the heat or the cooling and brings in fresh air and recovers the energy at the same time. Next slide. I've checked with the three major manufacturers because we have to have equipment in order to consider replacing, and we have a good inventory of the 80%, 92, and 95s. One of the manufacturers I talked to, this is what he's doing. They're monitoring the equipment flow weekly, what's going to flood damage, what's regular. They have a priority, and this is pretty much true with all the manufacturers. They have a priority shipment coming in, so they'll pull equipment from other parts of the country to assure that we have what we need. So inventory is not a problem to put in a new furnace. Next slide. How to choose an HVAC contractor. I don't know how the HVAC business is happening here, but we are a licensed entity. But I know after we have hailstorms, we have a lot of people show up from different parts of the country to do roofing work, and I'm concerned that the HVAC may suffer the same thing, that we have all these people coming up here to replace hot water heaters and furnaces that are not part of our local network. So you want to ask the contractor in your interview process if they understand the local codes and state codes, because this is a life safety issue, that they understand the codes and that they are licensed and that they know how to meet the codes, because at some point, someday you'll want to sell your home and the home needs to be in compliance with the repairs or the replacement that you're doing, because when your house gets ready to sell, an astute home inspector is going to say, show us the completed permits on your home. So ask if they have a license, what their license number is, and then check with your local building authority to see if the contractor is in good standing. They've pulled permits, they've completed permits, and that they did the work in a fashion that was acceptable to the building department. Next slide. This is a relationship. It's a technical relationship, like with a medical professional. So if they don't treat you well in the beginning, if they're not on time, they don't meet their obligations, it's only going to get worse as it goes through the relationship. So check with references with other customers, and I'd like to ask them if they have a physical building that they work out of. You know, there's nothing wrong with working out of your house, but just as long as they have physical assets, and you know, it kind of shows that they have some staying power. Next slide. Another thing is to ask them about their knowledge, skill sets, and their employees. If they're going to install a type A furnace or a type B furnace, ask them if their employees are certified by manufacturer A or manufacturer B. You know, like if you take your Chevrolet in to have it repaired, you want to make sure that you have Chevrolet technicians that know how to work on it and do the warranty work and are certified. There's other organizations like the North American Technicians Excellence Program. That's another certifying program. So ask about their credentials. If you went to an independent automotive dealer, they would have SEA certifications for their mechanics. That they are up to date on the U.S. technology, because industry standards are moving up and equipment's more complicated. They have microprocessors in them, so it's not like the old standing flame thermocouple units. Also, ask them if they understand about Energy Star, because that's another thing. If you're familiar with the new green addendum when you get ready to sell your home, you know, like when we do a lead paint statement, there's now a green addendum that they're doing in homes when they sell to say, is your house green? Is it efficient? So having Energy Star appliances, and your furnace is an appliance, just like your air conditioner. Next slide. Don't do business over the phone. If you say, I want to have my furnace replaced, they physically need to come out and see your home. This stuff is too complicated to quote over the phone. Also, they need to look at your home, the improvements that you made on it, look at the new energy efficiency furnaces, because if you have a 75,000 BTU furnace that's 15 years old, you may not need another 75,000 BTU furnace to do what needs to be done today. So it's not a in-out like changing a 50-watt light bulb for another 50-watt light bulb. There's some noodling that has to go into it, some thought. Make sure that you get a written proposal that identifies the equipment, the scope of work, the price, the taxes, the permits, the cost of the labor permits. I really, getting a permit really separates the good guys from those who may not do so well. Next slide. Quickly, this is very quick. This is a method of procedure for doing a repair. So if you're going to have your furnace repaired, this is a procedure to follow. It's very labor intensive. I've done this personally. If you look at it, next slide, there's a lot of labor involved, drying, polishing, cleaning. There's things that have to be replaced that's been exposed to the moisture. There's no repairing it. Next slide. The fiberglass insulation has to be removed and replaced if it's been exposed to moisture. All the surfaces have to be cleaned. Next slide. Like the compressor, air conditioning, it has to be cleaned, polished, and cleaned with denatured alcohol, and then it has to be dried for a while. These drying times are worst case. In New Orleans, that's kind of the drying time. Down there, here, we have a lot of dry climate. Next slide. On a furnace, this is the stuff that needs to be done. It's very labor intensive. By the time you do all the parts and all this stuff, you're going to be right at a new furnace. And so, next slide. That's me. Thank you.
Again, for folks who've just come in, we're going to be asking you to hold your questions to the end. So Laverne, no questions till the end, okay? Thanks. You're a good questioner, I know. So next we have, is it Michelle or Brian going to speak? Michelle Hubner and actually Brian Hardner, both here from Boulder County Land Use. We have Chris Allison, who's the Chief Building Official from City of Longmont, is here as well. He'll be available to answer any questions for Longmont folks. So the subject here that Michelle's going to take on is why permits and code compliance is important to you.
Hi, how's it going? So my boss couldn't be here, Gary Goodell, so I'm standing in for him. But Chris is a building official as well, so he can answer like any real general questions that you guys might have tonight. But one of the things I was asked to talk about was why you should pull a building permit, and I think the gentleman that just spoke really hit on all of it for me, or a lot of it, mostly about its safety. We want whoever's installing your new furnace, your new water heater, I can even talk about new windows. We want them to be safe and we want them to be installed properly. There's only a few other things we're going to look at. We're going to look to make sure you have carbon monoxide sensors in your home and smoke detectors. So those are the big things for that, but we do want to make sure it's safe. The building code is really provided to make sure we have a safe built environment with minimum standards. And we want to help preserve your property values is another reason. You know, he was talking about how when you're trying to sell your home, not only is that home inspector might be doing some research on what work's been done in your home, but we have a lot of people from the real estate companies coming in and they're checking to see if your basement was finished with a permit. They're checking to see if that hot tub that's installed in your backyard was installed with a permit. And I do have not a great story, but it's an example of recently, of course, gentleman came into the office and he had his basement finished. He didn't do it with a permit. He had 5 feet of mud in the basement. His insurance company came out and looked at it, and they denied his coverage because they looked it up and they said, you didn't do this work with a permit. And so that gentleman is really, he's having a hard time because he's not getting anything from his insurance company. So it's definitely in your best interest today and in the future when you're going to be moving on to a new home. The building codes are really designed to protect you. The other thing that my boss wanted to share too was, you know, not everybody can be an expert in everything. And the building code really helps make sure you're protecting your investment of your home. Because the inspector's going to walk through, they're going to make sure whatever work was done in your home is installed properly, whether it's a listed appliance like a furnace or a water heater, or whether it's a window, anything really, they're going to check to make sure it's installed properly. I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing in unincorporated Boulder County. Right now, we're taking in building permits for very minor problems. I want to use the word all interior work. So if you've had your basement flooded and you've had your electrical system affected, you can come in to my office. We're 2045 13th Street, like Gary said. You can get a building permit over the counter. We're not really requiring drawings. If you have them, that's great. simple sketch of your basement. It helps my building inspector when they go out in the field to look at it. If you look at the listing for wiring, it can't get wet. So if that wiring, that electrical in your basement did get wet, it does need to be replaced. Your insurance hopefully is going to help you out with it. If you've only got a couple of inches of mud or water in your basement and it was just drywall and insulation, it's okay to just replace that without a building permit. So I have a sign-up sheet up front after this, and if you have any specific questions for myself or Brian, anything about planning, you can sign up on that sheet. We have a listserv if you'd like to be notified about meetings and different events that you can sign up for. We also have signing up if you're interested in our buyout program. We don't really have much information on it yet, but we are taking names, your street address, your information, and getting you on a list, so you'll be notified as we find out things. And that's... And
Laverne was going to give me.
you did.
Oh,
But I'm going to let Chris come up. If
Can you
that's
talk about fees real quick?
Sure. So if you're coming in for a building permit to redo your basement, I say basement, but that could be if you're a slab on grade and you got mud or debris on your first floor. Again, it's a non-structural permit. It's all interior. You might need to replace windows because the windows got busted out. You can come on in for that permit. And right now we are charging just the use taxes. We're not charging any other fees for that. If your project's going to be more involved with that, if you've got a lot of structural issues, your house is gone. Right now we're not sure what the fee structure is going to be. The indication that I got this afternoon was we will be charging building permit fees just like we did for the 4 Mile Fire Canyon people. So, Chris is the building official from the city of Longmont.
Thanks. I brought some handouts, and they're up front. One of them is when is a building permit required? So there's a lot of general information in that. Obviously, with a flood, then we're going to be getting permits on most everything. But like Michelle was saying, what Boulder County did, City of Longmont did as well. So what we're doing is we're not charging a building permit fee and a plan review fee, but we are charging the tax. So the zero fees that you've heard, it's not zero, but when you look at that, you're going to pay that sales tax whether you go to the supply house and pay it or whether you pay it at the building inspection department. What you want to remember is you take your receipt with you when you go to buy materials, whether it's paint, carpeting, drywall, wiring, insulation, whatever that is, you take that receipt with you so they don't charge you that sales tax again because you've already paid it. Another handout that I brought is this, it's called Repairing Your Flooded Home. A lot of good information in there on that. And in Longmont specifically, we didn't really have much that got washed away. We had more flooding, water rose in basements and crawl spaces. And so I've got a basement finish handout up there as well. And it'll give you the basic information there. Again, I've got to agree with Michelle. The reason that we do inspections is for life safety. We're trying to keep everybody from doing something that may cause death or injury. And so it's really important to make sure that you get carbon monoxide detectors in, smoke detectors. That's all the same stuff that we're looking for. The damage, again, like Michelle was saying, that wiring that you've got in the basements, if that water level got above that wire, what I've been telling guys is you don't have to take that wire clear back to the breaker panel. You can just go up and put a junction box. You've got to get up above that water level, so the junction boxes have to remain visible and they have to remain accessible. Maybe you want to hang a picture over that junction box. I don't know, or find a closet to put it in, or a furnace room, or a room that you just really don't care that much about if you've got some blank electrical plates staring at you when you're done with it. So if that works, then that's the way to probably go. The insulation, drywall, of course we've had furnaces, water heaters. One of the inspections that we're putting on all of our cards, which we were asked to by Excel Energy, was they want us to put a gas pipe inspection on. So it's not that we've got to air up those gas pipes. What I'm trying to do is just make sure that when our inspectors get out there, for instance, CSST is a stainless steel tubing that's used for gas piping. If that water heater got water underneath it and it started to float, there's a possibility that it twisted some of that pipe. If it did, I'm wanting my inspectors to take a look at that. If we've got a problem with that gas pipe, I don't want that back on until there's been a test done. Because again, we don't need houses blowing up off their foundations like you see happening usually annually somewhere. So another thing is normally we don't do a drywall inspection, but if you had water damage in your garage, and so that house to garage wall that normally would have a rated, fire rated drywall on, we're asking for you to let us know, because we need to do an inspection on that. We want to make sure that if it was 5/8 drywall, that we get that put back on. Again, if that door was damaged, we want to make sure we get a solid core door in there. So those things are just some of the basics. And I don't want to dwell too much on this, but you got to remember that all of our records are permanent. Everything is scanned into a computer. We have insurance companies come in daily looking for records to find out what was and wasn't permitted. I don't want to put the scare in anybody. We're not the building police. We don't go out and check every house to see if they've had a permit. We don't follow lumberyard trucks to see if wherever they're dropping that material got permits. What I can tell you is all of that, again, since it's public record, any of that can be looked up at any time by anyone, whether it's an insurance company, realtor, homeowner, whoever. And I can tell you that does cause a lot of problems when people are trying to close, especially, because that's usually when they start thinking, oh, I wonder if we got that permit for whatever. And if the answer is no, then trying to do a retroactive permit on a deadline is not the time to be doing that. So another thing that we've done, and you got to figure that it was coming, is since everything's computerized, we've got all of the flood damage is on maps. So guess what? They're overlaying that map with all of the places that had permits. And so it's like, you know, they know which buildings had water damage. They know, you know, to what extent typically. And so, again, coming in and getting permits, these things are not terribly expensive, especially the furnace water heater permits. And the city isn't getting paid to do the inspections or to do any plan reviews. And like Michelle was saying, if it's a basement finish permit, I'm trying to do those the day they come in. So there shouldn't be any holdup in getting a permit. It should be available like the very next day, if not 48 hours at the latest. But we are working, trying to get all of those permits out as quick as we can. The furnace water heater permits are going out over the counter, so is the wiring. If all you're doing is just wiring, then that goes out over the counter, and we don't do any plan review there. But like I said, it's fairly inexpensive to get those permits, and I'd sure suggest doing it. I built for a number of years, and so I know what it's like on the other side of the counter, and where you've got to try to explain to people it's in their best interest to get a permit. But I tell you, I think that's the message that's got to go out. So that's all I've got.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Brian Harding. I'm a planner with the Boulder County Land Use Department. We know you guys all have a lot on your minds and a lot of other things going on in your life right now, so we appreciate you coming in tonight. Just to kind of differentiate, first of all, Michelle and I both work in the same office at the Boulder County Land Use Department. We have a little bit of a different role with the county. So Michelle works specifically with the building department. Think of Michelle kind of as your nuts and bolts, detail-oriented person when it comes down to the actual reconstruction of a house, construction of a new house, repairing of a house, things like that. The planners in the land use department serve a little bit of a different role. So think of us kind of as the big picture people. So I think the biggest thing I'd like to get across, I'm going to keep my presentation pretty brief here tonight, but think of us as your resource to come in and look at your property comprehensively. So we realize that there are tons of issues on properties. In a lot of cases, it's not as simple as just rebuilding or repairing. In some cases, there are driveways missing, bridges missing, culverts missing, houses missing, other accessory structures that have been damaged. In some cases, land is completely gone. In some cases, streams in a different location, roads are in a different place. So feel free to come on in and talk to us. We're more than happy to sit down with you and really look at the property comprehensively. Since the flood, things have really changed, I think, in the land use department. We have, as Michelle had said, we have a temporary cessation right now on all building permits and all dockets throughout the county other than flood-related permits. The purpose of that, that runs through October 30th. The purpose of that was for the first 45 days following the flood, that all of us are focusing specifically on flood-related issues. So I wanted to stress that in our office, we have been working on flood issues since the first moments of this flood. Some of us have been down in the operations center, answering missing person report phone calls. So we understand where you're at. So, the real goal, I think, since then is that, again, we're all focusing on the flood full-time right now. So that cessation on permits, again, goes through October 30th. During that time, we are issuing demolition permits, so feel free to come on in, talk to us about those. We're also issuing flood-related recovery, restoration, and repair permits. So those are, as Michelle mentioned, are for your interior work, drywall work, furnace replacements, things of that sort. Where things change a little bit is when we start looking at the larger property. We start looking at structure replacement, rebuilding, and repairing. Since the flood has started, we've been working on writing a new disaster regulation specific to the land use code that will address events such as the flooding. So we do have some disaster regulations on the books right now. We have found, though, that most of those tended to deal more with fires. So they didn't deal with some of the things that we saw coming through on the flooding. The flooding is being addressed specifically through these new regulations. Those new regulations went to the Planning Commission last night. They were passed unanimously, or recommended for approval unanimously by the Planning Commission. They then go on to the Board of County Commissioners next Wednesday. They're scheduled, assuming everything goes well with the County Commissioners, to take effect on November 4th. So what I would recommend, rather than going through all those different pieces of that, I will be in the back here with Michelle as well. I'll have my card for you, and I invite you to give me a call personally, send me an email, whatever works best for you, and I can send you drafts of those regulations and show you how that might affect your property. These new regulations will be in effect from November 4th, as proposed right now, through April 30th of next year. So the goal there is about 6 months that these regulations will be in effect. They are interim regulations, so as everybody knows, there are so many variables here with this flood. We're not going to be able to fix this simply in a couple weeks or a couple months. These interim regulations run through next spring to allow us more time to see what's going to happen with groups like FEMA, see what will happen with things like road reconstruction, stream realignments, and allow some of these things to fall into place. The nice part about these regulations, however, is that they give us some interim guidelines to get people back on the road to rebuilding, getting structures back, getting driveways, accesses, land restoration, all these other things back. So again, I'm more than happy to speak to anybody about those more in depth. The other thing that I really want to stress here is that as of this past Monday, down in our land use department, we opened the Flood Rebuilding and Permit Information Center. So this is a source. I am actually personally staffing this every single day from now for the foreseeable future. So we will be there starting this week. We're there from 8 to 4:30. Next week, we're adjusting our hours slightly. We have so many phone calls and emails to return that we're going to try to do that first thing in the morning. We'll be opening the doors for folks at 10 o'clock. So from 10 to 4:30, we'll be open. We will have people there from the land use department, building department, transportation, and public health. We'll all be in the same room. So you can come in, talk to a human being, sit down with us. We have cookies, water. I'm sure we have coffee somewhere too if you'd like. So come on in, talk to us. We're happy to spend as much time as necessary with you to really go through your property in detail and try to work with you to kind of outline a plan from where you are today to where you'd like to get to in the future. The final piece that I just wanted to mention, we also have new transportation regulations for bridge and access reconstruction. Those were just issued about 10 minutes before I left the office this afternoon. We do have these here. We can start to take a look at those with you. But again, I would encourage you to come on in and talk to us, and let's sit down in person and really start to sit down and go through the property comprehensively. So if you have any questions, we'll be up in the back afterwards tonight. We'll give it back to Gary.
Thanks, Brian. And also, those regulations will be posted on the Boulder County Flood.org website. So again, let's hold off the questions, and we'll be very informal. I'm sure we'll be able to answer every one of your questions. I have time for that. So now we'd like to have Margaret Rogers from Energy Smart come on down. She's going to talk about why investing in energy efficiency type of appliances and other replacement services make sense.
Hi, yes, I'm Margaret Rogers with Energy Smart, and even closer than this? That's good, all right. If you all are here in the audience tonight, that means that you are information junkies. And if anyone's ever called you information junkie, that means that you are also known as a resource. So the information that I'll be giving you tonight, please share with your neighbors, because this is good and important information. Energy Smart is a service that Boulder County has put in place to help people make their homes more energy efficient and comfortable. Since the flood, what we've been doing is helping people who've had their furnaces damaged, their hot water heaters, their ducting. I have a client whose ducts filled up with water, and that's D-U-C-T, not the other kind of ducts. And insulation. Insulation not only in crawl spaces that got flooded out, but from the rain, people who's had leaks in their roofs, and the insulation in the roof got wet. So those are all the folks that we're helping, and now I'm going to show you the different ways that we can help you. So next slide. First of all, when we just look at saving energy overall, there are a number of reasons that people come to the reason of saving energy. Some of them have to do with national security. This could make us as a country more secure to be using less energy. All the way from stewardship, independence. A lot of us here in Colorado like to be thought of as independent. And then, of course, the environmental issues that might come up, financial concerns, just the saving money or the finding rebates. Next slide. In any case, we always look to the future. In the surveys, what we had found is that 60% of the homes in the United States are either under-insulated or they have no insulation at all. And insulation is a really great place to start because, as you can see, a good contractor can help you save about 20% off of your energy bill. And then, why you would work with Energy Smart, click again. There we are. The main thing is save time. I've done work with many clients, and they say, you know, I could really have done this on my own. I could have researched all the contractors and researched who should have licenses and researched where the rebates are and researched where the financing is. They said, but you know, by coming to you all, we were able to do it in a much shorter time because the advisors in our office have that experience. And that's what we can do for you, is save you the time and the effort of having to do all that research. You'll see a lot of the same items that Ed first mentioned when he was talking about replacing systems are going to show up here too. A better appliance, a better furnace is going to make your home more comfortable. New windows will make your home quieter, so will insulation. That's the biggest surprise that people have when they insulate their homes, is that it does make it so much more quiet. And of course, all along the way, you're saving energy. Here is a slide that shows how your home is losing energy. This is a thermographic photo, an infrared photo of a home. It's taken during the winter, and so you can see the sky is blue. Blue is cold in this particular photo. Red is hot. There are things that we would expect to see red. For instance, if it is winter, they probably are burning a fire in their fireplace, and we would expect to see that the chimney is red. However, if you look, their entire roof ridgeline is red. That means that the warm air is leaking out. That is not a good sign. You also see on the cantilever, that little bump out on the side of the house, there's some red, orange, yellow there. There's some things going on there. What an infrared camera allows us to do is it gives us the superpower of seeing through walls. I can tell you exactly where the insulation is in that house and where it isn't, also where it's sagging. And so, again, when I'm talking with you all tonight, I'll be giving you general guidance, but in enrolling in Energy Smart, we can give you specific and guidance customized to your own home. Here's an example of an advisor. That's Dave Penscover working with one of his clients. And the kinds of things that we can do that will help you are listed here. And so very first off, you'll be assigned a personal energy advisor. Next, if you decide to do the home energy assessment, we can coordinate that for you. And it's during that assessment that you would get the infrared photos of the house that tell you exactly where the home is leaking. The other thing that happens is the inspector will test for what's called spillage. They'll go to your hot water heater, to your furnace, to check to see if the combustion gases are not burning completely and coming back into the thermal envelope of the home. We give you the customized recommendations. You're going to get expert impartial help, and this is why people, I think, have enjoyed the advisors the most, and that has to do with our impartiality. Because folks can call us and say, I need help on this, and we're not the contractors. We're not the people who are selling them something. We're the folks who say, this is the best information that we have from building science. And then, of course, we do help with assistance with rebates and financing. Rebates and financing, rebates are particular to where you live. And so again, when you call us, we can say, you know, tell us your address, and then we can figure out exactly which rebates would apply. Also, we are your resource for any other types of programs and services within Boulder County or within Colorado. One of them is what's called income qualified weatherization. So first we'll just start with weatherization because that's a whole mouthful there. Weatherization is, in this particular case, insulation or a new furnace. Those are the two things that Long's Peak Energy Conservation would provide. They would provide them to low-income and middle-income folks. Again, depending upon their qualification, the services may be available at a very discounted rate. Now, you all may have received some help from FEMA or some help from your insurance company, but maybe there's a bit of cash that's not being covered. This little video will tell you how we can handle that. Jeremy, try the other plug in my computer, the one right in front of the banana plug. You all have to hear the voiceover on this. It is so funny. So. Now we're not getting anything, Jeremy. You know what I can do is I can come up there with my microphone. Yeah, let's try that. When at first you don't succeed. Yeah.
It's a quaint little home, but its charm comes with some not so charming features. In the winter, bathing feels more like joining a family owns a quaint little home, but its charm comes with some not so charming features. In the winter, bathing feels more like joining a polar bear club. And staying cool in the summer comes at a cost. Frank can relate. He owns this coffee shop and works hard to keep his employees smiling and customers caffeinated. But with the rising cost of energy, he has little choice but to up his prices or cut wages. For both Emily and Frank, investing in efficiency improvements sounds complicated and expensive. Lucky for them, Elevations Credit Union has teamed up with Energy Smart and the Denver Energy Challenge to bring you Elevations Energy Loans, providing low-rate loans to eligible homes and businesses in Denver and Boulder counties. With this program, a team of experts will make your dreams of comfort and cost savings a reality. An energy advisor will help you find the best ways to reduce your energy use and save you even more money through available rebates. A qualified saving money. As for Emily, she can live comfortably in her charmingly efficient home. Start improving your home or business in Boulder or Denver County today. It's easy. Apply online at elevationcu.com/energy loans or give us a call. We'll take it from there. If you know someone like Emily or Frank, be a friend and share this story. If you're a contractor, join our program. Together, we can make Colorado living even better.
I always enjoy seeing that video. If you all want to see it again, it's on the Elevations Credit Union website. So one of the things I haven't mentioned to you is that Energy Smart is also available for businesses. Is anyone here owning a business? So we're all homeowners? Okay, good. Again, if you know someone who has a business who might want some assistance from Energy Smart, we're there to help as well. And then on this next slide, you'll just see our phone number. Now, we do have folks here tonight that can help you sign up this evening, or you can give us a call at these numbers, the 303-544-1000. The final thing that I'm supposed to say is, I believe, about the next speaker who's not able to join us on mold mitigation. We have received a number of calls in our office, in the Energy Smart office, about mold. The thing that we are telling people that we've learned from the mitigation companies is that if you actually see mold, then don't run the fans, because then you'll just make the mold airborne. If you see mold in the furnace, is that what you're asking? Oh, should you turn the furnace on? Then I'm gonna hold that question till the very end, because I think that's an important question, and I don't think I'm the person to answer it. Are you, Gary? Are you gonna answer the question?
Thanks, Margaret. We have someone here who can answer that question in a bit, but I want to just get our speakers in, and I'm going to introduce Clay Fong, who's with the City of Boulder Mediation Services, and he's going to talk about tenant and landlord rights and responsibilities, because we've heard people who are renters have a challenge with convincing their landlord that, in fact, they ought to be doing something to mitigate the flood impact. So, Clay, come on down. Thanks. Okay.
Okay, so my name is Clay Fong, and I'm the program manager of the City of Boulder's Community Mediation Service. We primarily serve properties that are within the City of Boulder city limits. However, in our resource guide, we also have some folks that can help outside of the City of Boulder, and primarily that's the City of Longmont's mediation service, which has a little more flexibility in serving people outside of the Longmont city limits, so they have a little bit more of a county outreach. So since the flood, we've received several hundred calls regarding legal landlord-tenant issues that have arisen because of the flood. And we've also put on a meeting in Boulder a couple weeks back, which was a panel of 5 attorneys. And these 5 attorneys answered several questions from the public about landlord-tenant issues. And in our handout, we actually have a reference to where you can find a video of that meeting that's kind of indexed, so you can see, like, you know, at 20 minutes in, they talked about mold issues, or they talked about specific issues related, like if someone was unable to access the property because the road was destroyed. But what I'd like to do is spend the next few minutes talking about some of the issues that we've encountered over time, and specifically I'd like to talk about issues around repairs, what in Colorado is called the warranty of habitability, which is something that governs leases in Colorado. It's a law that was enacted within the last 2 or 3 years. And also kind of looking at issues around compensation for tenants, and wrapping up with maybe some of the longer term issues that people ought to be on the lookout for. So I'd like to start by just talking about the first thing that arises when you have any issues between landlords and tenants is one should really first look at the written lease, because the written lease will oftentimes spell out what the responsibilities of landlord and tenants are with respect to repairs, although the law implies that the landlord in many cases has kind of a larger responsibility to fix things, particularly if damage to the things occurred not because of something that the tenants had done. Now, there are some instances, and this is actually fairly common, where there is not a written lease, And generally speaking, what's implied is that there is a verbal month-to-month lease, and many of these things still apply, although they might not be sort of down on paper. So the first thing to do is that if there is a conflict between the landlord and tenant, it's good to just see what does the written lease say. And if it doesn't say anything, let's talk now about some of the things that are implied, the protections that are available to landlords and tenants. So the main thing in Colorado is kind of two notions. One is what's called the warranty of habitability, which basically says a place has to meet certain minimum standards, and if it doesn't, the landlord has an obligation to make repairs so that it does meet those standards. Related to that is the idea of constructive eviction, which means it's so awful where you're at that the tenant can move forward with getting out of the lease early. However, the law doesn't make it exactly easy for this to happen, so there are some steps that you have to follow for this to occur without further obligation on the part of the tenant. The other piece I would add too is that this is just sort of, we're offering a general overview here. I'm not acting as an attorney, so I'm not offering specific legal advice. However, I can also point you to some legal resources that can offer you that advice that would be specific to your situation. So generally, warranty of habitability comes up when there are things that materially affect the health and safety of the tenant. So flooded out basement, particularly if you're in a basement apartment, could certainly fall into that. There's also an issue though, if say a property is completely destroyed or there's significant damage where it's not clear when things can be fixed, the landlord can unilaterally, in the instance of a disaster, essentially say the lease is up. And the tenant can then sort of move on, there's no further obligation, and the landlord can essentially declare that. In these instances, it's good though to have a conversation about what's going to happen with the security deposit. Typically, if it doesn't say anything in the lease, you have 30 days to give it back as a landlord. You can also write up to 60 days, that's the maximum limit in Colorado, but given these sort of circumstances, it's probably a good idea to have a conversation about whether the lease can be given back early, because the tenant will probably need that to put as their security deposit for the place that they intend to move into. So the other issue with habitability is, let's say you're the tenant and it's not habitable now, but you're willing to stay. One thing that's important is for a tenant to give the landlord a written request to make necessary repairs. And here's where things get a little interesting. The landlord has a reasonable period of time to make those repairs. And the legislature, in their great wisdom, didn't say what constitutes a reasonable amount of time. Typically, it's understood to be a week. However, something like a disaster like this changes it, because we don't know about the limitations, about how quickly can you get a qualified contractor, are there shortages of necessary materials, can you get the drywall in time? So that time frame has been extended because of the particular circumstances that are here, and I think you kind of have to look at what happens. If the landlord does not complete these things on a timely basis, the tenant can then move forward to, one, mediate and come up with a written agreement or negotiate a written agreement on their own to terminate the lease, or two, speak with an attorney about what the specific court process is to essentially get out of the lease, making a warranty of habitability claim. One real key point, in Colorado, you cannot withhold rent unilaterally if you feel that the landlord hasn't lived up to what they should do. What typically happens is that if you bring a warranty of habitability claim, the court may ask to put that money in escrow. So they don't want you to use habitability as a way to kind of not pay rent. So if anything happens, like if the landlord does say that you can't, you don't have to pay rent, get that in writing. Now, typically, if you're displaced from a place for, say, like 2 weeks, there is an obligation for the landlord to, it's likely that the landlord's best move in that situation would be to prorate the rent for the time that you were out. But there's not an obligation for the landlord to put you into a hotel or find alternative lodging for you. And there might be some, negotiation around, because in some instances it might be if somebody's in a basement apartment, there's another unit they can move them into, or if they're in a house, there's an upstairs bedroom. And so there can be some negotiation around that with respect to, how much money changes hands, etc. So that's kind of the basic piece, is that warranty of habitability is what affords the landlord a reasonable opportunity to make the necessary repairs to make the place livable again. And if they don't do that, the tenant can then move forward and take action against the landlord to terminate the lease early with no penalty to them. So the other issue that we'd like to look at just very briefly is what are some of the longer term things that happen. If you break a lease with a tenant, you're not under an obligation to, because you need time to repair and they're not going to be able to move back in. You're not under any legal obligation to re-rent to them again, nor are you under any obligation to charge the same rent when you start renting it to another person in the future. So that's kind of one piece that's good to know. The other thing, particularly if you're getting repairs and you don't want your tenants to come back to you and say, well, I got sick because the repairs weren't done adequately, get as much documentation and certification as you can from contractors so that you can show that you made a good faith effort to get the best possible job done. So with respect to how you might tend to resolve these disputes, like I said, mediation is a low-cost service that's available in Boulder and Longmont. So you can contact our offices and our information is there. There's also legal aid and legal services, but also the Colorado State Bar has set up a free legal advice line, and that information is also contained in the handout on how to contact them. So you have a variety of options available to you to sort of resolve some of the disputes that may arise in the landlord-tenant context. However, one always wants to avoid going to court. So what I'd recommend is first try to negotiate something on your own and definitely put it in writing, because you don't want people coming back to you saying that, this obligation is still out there or you still owe me some money, and just be very specific. For example, I did a mediation where there was an early move out, and we were just very specific that the security deposit would be returned at the time of inspection, so there wasn't that 30 to 60 days so that the people could move on. The keys would be exchanged then and there, and there was an expectation that the tenants would still take care of and clean the part of the rental unit that wasn't impacted by the flood. The lower part had been flooded out, but they still wanted the upstairs bedrooms to be clean and tidy, so that was basically it. So that's a very quick overview of the major issues relating to post-flood and landlord-tenant. And if you have additional questions, I'll be up front, but also this resource guide should answer a lot of the issues that may arise.
Thanks, Clay. Why don't the speakers come up here and we'll get ready for questions. And why don't you grab that microphone, you guys can share that. But I want to just say one last thing here. How many of you had property damage from the flood? That's why you're here. How many of you have filed with FEMA for individual assistance? Anybody not? Have you? Right. How about SBA loan? How many of you have applied for that? Landlord should. So I'm not going to. I want to urge you to consider applying for SBA loan. I'm not here being a shill for the SBA organization, but what I'm learning is there's a limit to the individual assistance funds that you can get from that. It's usually about $30,000, the maximum. So a lot of times at this stage of a disaster, you don't really know the extent of the financial impact you're going to have. What happens with this SBA loan, that gives you some flexibility. It's a 1.9% interest loan, and you don't have to use it. You can decline it. But if you don't apply for it by the deadline, which is November 14th, you'll never, ever be able to apply for it. So what we're urging people to do is go to one of the disaster recovery centers in Longmont, Twin Peaks Mall, in Boulder, 55th and Arapahoe, or go online and look at the application. It's not that hard to fill out, and talk to someone if you're at one of the centers and see if you qualify. If it comes back and you've qualified, you can again. You have 6 months to decline it. But it gives you some flexibility and some funds if you may need it for things that are more significant than you had thought. So I just want to urge you to do that. Again, November 14th is the deadline for applying for SBA loans. So let's open up for questions. And I'm going to ask you to speak in the microphone. So, Laverne,
What was her name? Michelle. Well, Michelle mentioned that to do this because of the insurance, but I wanted to say that most people don't have insurance that will cover like a sump pump dying and flooding your basement. And if you're out in the boondocks hill and that happens, your electricity goes out, you're not going to get any coverage, are you?
So it's not just your insurance covering you, it's also protecting your home in the long run. So specifically, let's talk about your rental property. we want to make sure that whatever work you do in your rental property, and this applies to your homes you live into, that it's done safely. And like he was talking about, you know, the renter has rights, just like you in your own home. If you're hiring somebody to come in and do the work, you know, they're experts, just like this this gentleman said. You know, these are experts in installing HVAC systems and water heaters, types of equipment like that. You know, I personally, I don't know exactly how this equipment works, but we have experts in the field that it can make sure that that equipment is installed properly and that it is vented properly, and that you're not getting, for instance, combustion air into your home instead of having it vented out of your home. And it's not a matter of necessarily your insurance paying for the work. It's making sure that the new equipment that you put in has a building permit, so that the next time there's an issue with it, you can prove that you pulled a building permit for that new piece of equipment. And that's really what we're trying to tell you about.
Yeah, I think what Laverne's bringing up, if you had a flood and you didn't have flood insurance, your homeowner insurance is not going to cover for most of these things.
Right.
So,
right.
just wanted to clarify. There's a question back here.
If you had a sump pump and the sump pump failed, then we have had several clients tell us that their insurance did cover that. When they didn't have a sump pump at all, then they weren't covered at all.
Okay, I have a question for Ed, the guy from the Red Rocks. Is there a place where we can get a copy of that checklist you had for looking at your hot water heater and your furnace, if you wanted to do it yourself, and kind of the checklist to try to remediate it or see if it's repairable?
Yes, I'm going to have a sign-up sheet on the table to the right as you go out the door, and we'll email it to you.
And David Cohn is here as well. He's a inspector. He inspects us for asbestos, for mold. Do you want to just give a quick hit about what you do, and then maybe one
Correct.
or two other questions?
I'm an environmental consultant. It's actually an industrial hygienist, and what we do is we perform asbestos and mold testing for our clients. After this, quite a few people are doing work themselves, and they don't really understand the asbestos rules and mold remediation, and that's where I might be able to help out, because every one of you guys probably have a different problem. So afterwards, if you have a very specific problem in your house, I'd be glad to answer that. But if you do have some general questions that everybody might benefit from, I'd be glad to answer those.
Brian, you mentioned some regulations that are going in now through April 30th or something. How would it be different if I apply before April 30th versus if I wait till after April 30th?
Sure, it's a really good question. I think it's something that we're actually trying to determine ourselves right now. So to be clear, these regulations that are going to go into effect, assuming everything goes well, they'll go into effect November 4th through April 30th. Those are the regulations that will govern during that 6-month period. There's a lot of variables that came along with this flood, and as many of you know, there are roads that aren't where they used to be. They're just simply not there. There are stream channels that are hundreds of feet from where they used to be, which of course with it changes floodplains. What we're trying to determine over that next 6-month period for folks that are affected by any of those changes is what the long-term impact of that is going to be. So in some cases, there are areas where these streams and river channels have already been pushed back. There are areas where CDOT, the state, and the county already has a general idea of where these roads are going to go. There are other areas of the county where these are unknowns that will start to fall into place here over the next few months. They just don't simply exist at the moment. So the idea here at the moment is that this gets people that are fortunate enough to be in a position where they can start to rebuild, start to repair, or if they have areas in the property that if there's a structure that was damaged and they can move it to a safer area. During that 6-month period, these are the regulations that will allow them to start in that process. So during that time, as land use staff, and of course working with building staff and other county staff, our goal will be to start addressing these more complex issues. In some cases, we're waiting for information from the state, we're waiting for information from FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers. These are all variables that we hope during the 6 months will start to work themselves out. What you'll start to see during the 6-month period, of course with the end goal here of April 30th, you'll start to see these new regulations taking shape. They'll be going to Planning Commission hearings, going to Board of County Commissioners or Board of County Commissioners hearings in hopes that once we get to or April 30th, if not sooner, that these newer regulations governing all these other aspects that haven't quite been figured out yet will fall into place. So I think the long story short to your question is we don't know exactly how the regulations may vary after April 30th. What I think we'll probably see, and this is me just guessing ahead, what we don't want people to do here is we don't want people to rush in by April 30th. So I don't want people to think that April 30th is a specific deadline. It's basically just an interim guideline period or regulatory period. After April 30th, we'll probably see a lot of the continued rebuilding occurring. We realize that some people may barely even be started in the process by April 30th. So after that point, I think what we'll see is a lot more guidance on what may happen in some of these unknown areas. I think we'll still see a lot of the same, if there are advantages in this case, to folks getting back in without having to go through some of the other regulatory processes that we have now, like site plan review. We may see those kinds of programs continued. So I think you'll see a lot of what's happening in the first 6 months continued, but with a lot more guidance on these unknown areas continuing after that.
So what I would suggest, thanks. I would suggest you go in and talk to them in your specific case and see what might be coming, might not be coming, what would be covered by these regulations.
Gary, the only thing I wanted to add to Brian, because he's totally correct, is really what these intern regulations are kind of grabbing are the people that are ready. And we understand that you're home, you might not be ready. So we don't want you to rush. And I know Brian said it, but I just wanted to reiterate it. We're looking at homes that have had slight damage, maybe a little bit more. Sorry, I'm not coming up with the other word, but it's something that's not necessarily destroyed. And that those are the people that might be applying and might be ready. You're home, you might not be ready. So don't, things are we're going to learn as we go. And that's one of the purposes of this.
Yeah, to dovetail with that, if you issued the permits prior to April 30th, how long would that permit be good for? So you can get the permit, when do you have to start construction?
So let's make sure we understand this. So starting on November 4th, you're going to actually apply for a...
Put me on the spot there. This will be a hazard mitigation review. So anybody that's looking to rebuild. So again, there are several levels of building permits here, and I think to get to the point that you're asking, these permits during the 6-month period are for people that are ready to rebuild. So these are people that may have land left to rebuild a structure that was damaged by the flood. They may have areas outside of a floodplain that are sort of these easy areas or safer areas that we can start to get things rebuilt in. During that 6-month period, what we're going to have is something called a hazard mitigation review. So you won't have to go through site plan review. I think that's one of the advantages of these new disaster regulations that take effect. So to rebuild essentially what was there before, but perhaps in a different location, site plan review is not going to be something you have to go through. But what we will be doing is working with folks to do what we're calling this hazard mitigation review. So ideally, these are still taking shape, so I want to be clear about that. There will be a more specific guideline set up here. But ideally, the thought process is that likely a planner will come out to the property with you. What we want to make sure of is that where a structure may be rebuilt or completely restored is that it's in a safe place. A lot of these properties have changed dramatically. In some cases, of course, we've looked at mapped floodplains before, but we ran into all sorts of new hazards, mud flows, debris flows, rock slides, things of that sort. We want to make sure that we're giving people the opportunity to potentially rebuild, but in an area that's not going to be detrimental to them in the future. So that's going to be, I think, one of the big keys coming in during the next 6 months.
So once that process is complete, then you're going to be applying for your building permit. And your building permit, you're going to give me a complete application. You're going to give him a complete application. Once that application is accepted, we're going to plan review it. We're going to look at it to compare to what was approved through this hazard mitigation plan. And then we're going to issue a building permit. As long as you're actively working on your building permit, it doesn't expire. A way of proving that you're actively working on the building permit is calling for inspections. That's a way. Another way is to give us some notification. You can write us a letter, tell us what you've been doing and when you expect to. If you haven't called for an inspection in 6 months, 180 days, we are going to ask you for that letter.
I guess the issue is more just supply. You can make all the plans you want, but if I can't get concrete till May, I'm sitting on a permit.
And we understand with that. We've been building in Boulder County for a while. We do understand the limitations of building in the mountains, yeah.
Okay, one last question that I have is the North St. Vrain cuts through my property, and it took thousands of cubic yards of fill out of my property. Obviously, when I want to fill and where I want to fill, some of it is commonsensical that I can obviously put it where a road was. But let's say I want to reclaim some areas that the river took. The river's back into its pretty much its normal channel. It's going high right now. But where do I get information about where I can fill and not fill and so forth and so on?
So that will be part of that review process that Brian was just explaining.
And what's that?
Already been there.
We had a great conversation on Monday. Something I wanted to add to that, so that's a question that a lot of people brought up, is I need to fill or restore part of my property within where the stream channel is. So to be very clear, all of these rivers, streams, and creeks, they are regulated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as waterways of the United States of America. So what's very critical about that is that some of this permitting has to happen on a national level. So before you go and fill in the wetlands, fill in the riparian corridors, fill in the creeks, come to us and talk to us. I have some really good paperwork to give you about obtaining an Army Corps of Engineers permit. They have outlined a pretty clear process for doing that. I think the big thing to keep in mind is that before you fill in a stream, remember that once you fill in area where water used to go, that water has to go somewhere else. So if you think about the fact that if you fill in on your side of the bank, your side of the stream, it may very easily divert water across onto your neighbor's property. Likewise, same thing goes for bridges. So please feel free to come in and talk to us about bridges. We have new regulations related to that from the Transportation Department. It's very critical that new bridges going in are engineered to withstand future floods and also to span these floodways that we have. So if you can imagine, and many of you probably saw this happen, bridges that were too low to the stream ended up causing debris dams. Those debris dams diverted rivers onto other people's property. In other cases, bridges that weren't wide enough to span the channels, the rivers actually went around them, bridges collapsed in on themselves, and again, either created more debris dams or diverted water into properties in areas that they shouldn't have gone. So there's a lot of different variables there. So again, feel free to come in and talk to us. We're more than happy to sit down and look at your individual situation and work it out from there.
We're recording this, so.
I just wanted to know if that applies to exempt waterways and ditches that have collected water?
That's a really good question. So
I wonder if you could, sounds like it's just pretty particular to you. Does anyone else have an exempt waterway? Can you mind asking him at the end? Thanks.
Sure.
We really want to focus on general questions. If you have really property-specific question, grab one of these folks at the end.
My question is for Longmont permits, and you mentioned several different kinds of permits, so I'm not sure if I need one big one for my basement, or if I need one for my furnace and one for my water heater and one for my windows, and do I need one for my washer dryer, and did I need one for my fence to keep my dogs in? And
So the short answer is it's easier to just have one permit,
okay,
because then all of the inspections are put on there. If they're put on in order, so you can figure out which inspection needs to be done next. No, we don't inspect washers and dryers. Yes, furnaces, water heaters. Yes, fence, although what we try to do is look at the records that we've got now and try to make sure that it's just going back in the same place. So some of what we've heard that the land isn't there anymore, we need to talk if you're trying to fence something that, your land's gone or whatever. But otherwise, yeah, it's pretty much just, we can do all of those permits. We try to do 90% of them over the counter, but the ones we can't, we try to get reviewed within 48 hours.
okay. And then you mentioned something about sales tax, and it sounds like if you have the permit already, you can take it to Home Depot with you, and if you've already purchased supplies and you don't have the permit in hand because I can't get my husband to make a drawing, is there anything that I can do to get the sales tax back?
Right, so the easiest way at that point is if you've already purchased some of the materials, sometimes it's just easier to purchase the rest of the materials, bring receipts in, and then that way you prove that you paid sales tax, and then we don't charge the sales tax.
Oh, okay.
And just for anybody in Boulder County, we can't do it that way. You do need to pay your use taxes to Boulder County. So when you do get your permit, so you want to remember, get your permit first, then bring it into Home Depot, Lowe's. As long as you're buying materials in Boulder County, you don't have to pay those double taxes, but you do need to pay it to us.
Okay, I was wondering about the land use and the Corps of Engineers. Like our land is, now we have us rocks and sand and lots of big, and trees down. Will we be responsible for cleaning all of that up, or will somebody be in there to help us re-divert that and clean that up?
So there's a couple questions there. One is, right now, you have a lot of woody debris on your property? And is it also true that the stream has changed alignment on your property? A little bit, okay. Okay. So it sounds like there is a possibility for additional water channels to come in and affect your property and your house. Is your house still there? It is. So in terms of debris, the county is just in the process of developing a plan for helping you pick up debris and remove it and take it and dispose of it. So we're going to be contacting you. You should give me your email address or contact. We're probably try to do some curbside pickup of woody debris. We've been doing household debris right now, but we're starting to move into woody debris. So we'll come by, pick it up, and dispose of it for you. Now you need to get it to the curb. And there's volunteer, I know, and then it's a site-by-site thing. If you have massive debris, well, we need to talk about that and figure that out. There's also a group called the NRCS, the National Resource Conservation Service, that is back from being furloughed, and they have funding to help with this as well, possibly. So we need to look at that. So let's just talk, and we'll help you with that. But in terms of stream realignment, that we're looking at on a system-wide basis, but that really is an individual property owner's responsibility. The county doesn't own the creeks, and it doesn't have jurisdiction. You'd have to come to what I would say is you come into our center, you need a floodplain development application and a Corps of Engineering permit to do that. Other questions? Let me just see if there's anyone that hasn't asked. Anyone else that hasn't asked a question yet? Like to? Okay, we'll get to you, promise, Mr. Exempt.
Thank you. Do I understand this correctly, that Boulder County has a contract with FEMA? They're picking up trash like this from public accesses, but and I think the name I heard was Kathy Carroll was the person who kind of has the contract, and that it expires tomorrow or something?
So you're in Apple Valley, right? So right now, Lyons is working with Apple Valley to remove debris, and they've been doing it curbside. Ed Keene is the lead person on that, and he'll probably be here for this next meeting, and I'd suggest you talk to him. I did see something on their website about this weekend being a big volunteer effort, and perhaps the curbside stopping. For you in unincorporated Boulder County, our program will also be available after this. So people have called me and said, is this our last chance? No, it's not going to be your last chance to put debris out on the curb. But if you have people around and you have the opportunity, I'd take advantage of what's going on, because you don't know what the weather's going to be and may make it harder. But no, our program for unincorporated Boulder County is just going to start going for woody debris. Yeah, they are picking it up, but there is something on the website saying that this is the 19th is the last day. Maybe someone from Longmont or Lyons. Okay.
Your timing on the question about debris is really good. The Lyons is working with the county, so that's Kathy Carroll, to extend the contract for household debris and then the green debris, which is the wood and sand and silt. Like he said, you have to have the material curbside, but that work will continue to be done through the county on a contract with their own. They have contracts they're working on. We're working with an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement with Lyons and Boulder County to do that work. No, initially they were stopping household debris on the 18th, and that still holds because they have put out a request for proposals to extend that work. So that's why you'll hear, please make sure you have material out
at the curb on the 18th because that contract does end. Then they're opening up another request for proposals to continue that work and then add in the green debris. Does that make sense? The Town of Lyons.
And okay. Yeah. Do you know Longmont, what their program is for picking up debris and curbside and when that'll end?
Yeah, sorry, I'm in building inspection.
So is there a website or a place?
I'm sure there is. You know, the natural
City website?
Yeah, the Public Works Natural Resources website probably has.
Okay. Any other questions for what mold, buying appliances, landlord tenants, Energy Smart?
I just had a quick question about 4 Mile. If I understand you right, you haven't started the debris pickup in 4 Mile?
So the question is, have we started the debris pickup in 4 Mile? No, and so we don't want you putting debris on the road yet, along the road, because we're starting to reconstruct that road for the 2-lane winter road too as well. That should start in the next week or so. So house debris, I have someone you can work with to help you coordinate that. Okay, so talk to me after this and we'll work on the household debris and hazardous debris. They are removing that dumpster at the bottom of 4 Mile and Canyon because of bear activity. Because people are putting garbage, their household garbage in this.
I had a general question about mold. If I have baseboards and framing and wood paneling that's turning black, is that automatically bad or just something to check on?
It's highly indicative that you have something there growing. That I can't explain without testing. But usually if you can rub your hands against it and you're getting a powdery substance, if you're rubbing your hand against it and getting a powdery substance, it's highly likely mold or some type of bacteria or something along those lines. I usually recommend my clients, if you can see it, touch it, feel it, it's probably there growing and you probably need to remediate it. It's not necessary to test in all circumstances. If you have legal liability issues with tenants and that, then I would highly recommend getting it analyzed and quantified so that you can, if it ever comes back, be able to say with a document that's legally binding and say, here you go, we did it correctly. And that's when I would recommend testing beforehand. Now, before rebuilding, you've gone in, you've done your flood cuts, everything's removed, you're ready to start rebuilding, but you're worried about mold. This is where an indoor air quality assessment might be recommended, because you want to come in and see, hey, did I get rid of all the issues in my house, or do I currently have mold colonizing and growing and getting bigger? The big thing that I've seen in Cedar Rapids after the floods, a lot of homeowners did the work themselves, did no mold remediation, no testing. 6 months later, spring comes, humidity goes through the roof, and everyone's houses started growing mold inside. So one thing to consider would be to do some type of mold testing before you rebuild.
So I was concerned because we had our crawl spaces were full of water and we have that pumped out. And so yesterday we went and bought 2 dehumidifiers and put in the crawl space. Well, someone said that didn't really work, but we went and emptied a bunch out today. But would we need to have that sprayed for mold, the crawl spaces, the cement and the dirt?
Well, let me ask you one question. Do you have a lot of building debris on that dirt, such as cardboard or sawdust or wood chips, or is it pure dirt?
It's all cleaned out and the vapor barrier's gone and it's just dirt.
Well, if you are worried about spores being on that soil, it would be of no harm to you to go in and spray an antimicrobial across all that soil and wood products, because it will, as it dries, will kill any mold spores that were left behind. Since it is microscopic, you can't see it, I can't see it. When you see mold, there's tens of thousands, if not millions of spores that have built a colony. So you can see there's a higher level of spores. But an individual spore, you'll never be able to see with the human eye.
So Dave, the question was asked before about don't turn on the fans. Should you turn on the furnace?
Well, what I usually recommend, and I'm assuming most of you, this is in a basement, is what we're seeing in Boulder and the surrounding cities, is number one is to contain that area if you see mold. It doesn't hurt to go up and tape up up some plastic over your door so that you don't have that potential of cross-contaminating your upstairs or other rooms. Number two, most furnaces that we're seeing, they're bringing in clean air from the ceiling or from the roof, attic area, down into the furnace, and they're not pulling that air from the basement area. A good way to check to see if your vents are pulling air from your basement is to put a simple lighter up to it. The flame's going to go towards the vent, it's sucking air. If it goes away, it's pushing air. So anything that's sucking air means you'd want to seal that up so that we're not cross-contaminating other areas within our house.
Great, thanks.
I understand that mold testing and remediation is kind of can be a scam area. What would a person expect to pay for a test, and how would you assure that they really submitted it to a lab and that they're just not telling you, oh, it's a problem?
Well, most companies, I can't speak for all, of course, utilize third-party labs that are certified. My company, we use all third-party labs. We do not do any reading of samples ourselves. What that does is that now puts the legal liability off my company onto the lab, and there's no conflict of interest. Some companies do provide, environmental firms do provide their own asbestos sample reading because they get certified to do that. However, that's now getting into the conflict of interest because now I'm going to be sampling and reading that product. And that's why we would highly recommend any consultant that comes in and does any type of testing for you is taking that to a third-party lab. Now, when it comes to asbestos, you do have to be certified by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. When it comes to mold, there's industry standards that people get certified on. There's no laws regarding mold. So that's where you might come to the conclusion that a lot of people have utilized that industry to scam and make money off of. The average mold inspection for a consultant like me to come into your house, spend an hour, do an inspection in your basement, and write a report, on average would be roughly around $400. Plus or minus, depending if you want more air samples taken, things like that. So we also do visual inspections. Sometimes, like yesterday, I went into a crawl space. All I did was hired for was a visual inspection. Can you find mold in my crawl space? Well, they had the building debris and things like that on the ground, and every piece I pulled up had mold growing on it. I don't need to sample. I can tell them you need to get this cleaned up immediately. The longer it sits there, the more spores are created and the more damage that can happen to your home.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Your cigarette lighter comment got my attention. Any of you that have propane, natural gas or methane is lighter than air. So when you have a methane or natural gas leak, it goes up. If you have propane puddles, I'm retired Air Force. We had an explosive device called a fuel air explosive. Basically propane, 1 pound of propane mixed at 18% to air is equal to 10 pounds of TNT. It's extraordinarily dangerous. So if you have propane, don't use the cigarette lighter. And engage a professional, because natural gas, there's some wiggle room if you try to do some work yourself. But propane, I highly recommend getting a professional in there because it is extraordinarily deadly.
Vapor barrier. Was it you who said that you took up the vapor barrier? Okay. We're getting a lot of calls saying that it was recommended to them to remove the vapor barrier. Just remember that in Colorado, the vapor barrier is there for a reason. It's there for 2 reasons at least. One is it keeps the moisture from coming up into your home. It keeps it under the ground, which is where it should be. So once the mold is mitigated, once things dry out, then you're going to want to consider putting the vapor barrier back down, because the other reason is it keeps the radon from coming into the home. And in our dry climate, we're much more likely to have radon issues than we are long-term mold issues. So as far as the radon goes, if you enroll with the Energy Smart service, then we'll provide you a radon kit for sampling. If, however, you don't enroll and you want to contact Boulder County Public Health, Boulder County Public Health will provide you a free radon kit as well, with directions on how to make sure you use it. The kit itself is not only free, but the analysis is also free. So remember, when you buy the ones from the hardware store, you're buying the kit, you're going to pay again for the analysis.
Thanks, Margaret. Now, is Energy Smart free?
Energy Smart has free phone advising. So anytime you call us, it's absolutely free to call us. If you'd like an advisor to come out to your home, there's a small trip charge of $50. If you want the entire home energy assessment, that's not done by Energy Smart, it's not done by Boulder County, but done by independent technicians. And what Boulder County has arranged is they'll pay $200 of it if you pay $135 of it. Longmont has a little bit better deal going on right now where they pay a portion and then the homeowner pays $70.
So for that fee, someone will come out to your home, do an audit, and do that infrared photography, the door test, and give you some recommendations on how to do improvements to your
That's
energy
exactly right.
source.
They're at your home for an hour and a half to 2 hours, crawling in your crawl space, climbing up in the attic, testing the walls for the insulation, and then they go back to their own offices and put together a report. It usually takes them about 2 to 4 hours. So for the amount, it's a really good deal. It's right now probably the best deal that they'll ever be.
Great, thanks.
One more thing on radon. The city of Longmont, if you check, or if you go to the library, you can check out a testing device at the library, same as checking out a book. So it's no charge. You just go to the library and pick that up.
Good evening. I'm Edwina Salazar, and I'm the Executive Director of the R Center. And we have a booth outside of the room here. We are the receivers. We've been donated food and clothing from all over the country for people who are survivors of the flood. We have vouchers for a distribution that we will be having on Saturday. There are lots of, we've actually organized it very well and have new and very gently used items and a whole array of food and household products and personal care products to give to people who are flood survivors. Some of you are landlords and have renters. They are actually eligible if they were affected by the flood, and also people who lost their jobs or who haven't worked because of the flood. So we'd like to encourage you to stop for the vouchers, but also to come by. You don't have to get the vouchers tonight. We will be issuing vouchers on Saturday. Our warehouse is actually going to be our future R Center. It's at 220 Collier, and we will be open from 9 to 3. So we really want to encourage you. The generous people of our community and all around the country really have given these items to people who are flood survivors. So please feel good about coming for those items. And anyone else you know who's been affected by the flood can just show up from 9 to 3, and we'll be able to do a very brief interview and make sure that they get what they need. You know, we certainly want to be helpful. The other thing that we have, if you have had any financial difficulties and haven't recovered completely, we do have some funds available to help with some items like utility payments, rent payments, if you have renters, and other items like glasses replacement. If you lost some official documents that a fee is required to retrieve them, like birth certificates, that sort of thing, we do have help available for that as well. And I really encourage you to utilize the help because it was donated for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Edwin. Any other questions you have? Was there one? So thank you all for coming. I want to thank the speakers and the presenters for taking their time to come here. So, I I want to thank LifeBridge. I want to thank the Sustainability Office from Boulder County for putting this together. It's a short notice, and we are going to now ask everyone to walk out into the lobby, and we'll be here to answer more detailed questions. But we do need to get out of here so the Town of Lyons can set up for their next meeting. So thank you very much.